The board game Evolution by North Star Games was originally developed to demonstrate and teach natural selection. Pivot, a school for underprivileged teenagers in the United Kingdom, has incorporated wargames such as Flames of War into its history classes. Dice for Diversity, a social inclusion roleplay business based in Canberra, Australia, has adapted the popular tabletop role-playing game Dungeons & Dragons to help autistic children develop their social skills. Now, my question is, can this game be applied to my ESL classes? Hi, my name's Josh, and I teach English as a second language at a university. I also happen to be a massive nerd. Now, every teacher brings something different to this field, whether it's from their educational or cultural background, or even from their personal interests. I plan to use this channel to document my attempts to introduce RPGs to my students, and hopefully incorporate them into my classroom routines. I hope that this series of videos will prove useful for other teachers who might be looking to do the same in their own classrooms. Alright, so why do this in the first place? Well, why not? Silly jokes aside, there are actually a number of ways that D&D or other role-playing games can benefit ESL students. Spontaneous language use. These role-playing games differ from other role-plays that you see in pretty much any language classroom in that the language produced by the students is spontaneous and not rehearsed. Normally, when students are performing a role-play in a language class, they are reciting from a script, either a script from the book or a script that they've made themselves, but still just reciting a script. There are no scripts in D&D. Building confidence. This should not come as a surprise at all to anyone who has played D&D for a decent amount of time. I think we all have experiences or know someone who has had some experience where their confidence has vastly improved through playing D&D long term. If you would prefer some hard evidence, I would point you to a study done by a master's student at the Universidad de Puno. Sorry if I'm butchering the pronunciation there. As part of his master's project, Carlos Antonia Rojas Manzaneda, again, sorry if I'm butchering the pronunciation there, ran an 8-week-long D&D campaign at a local English training centre. During the campaign, he found that students became a lot more active and a lot more confident in their English usage. This especially applied to the shy students, those students who prior to the study were not very active in class and extremely reluctant to speak up. Exercise for the imagination, problem-solving skills, and possibly cultural exchange. Most of my students have primarily been educated in an environment which has a heavy emphasis on rote memorization and very teacher-centered learning, such as lectures or students watching a teacher demonstrate a science experiment at the front of a class rather than doing the experiment themselves. Naturally, this has given them few opportunities to exercise creativity and some problem-solving skills. I hope to use these D&D sessions as an opportunity for the students to practice exercising their creativity. My only concern here is that as a result of the way that they've been educated throughout most of their lives, a lot of them sometimes have difficulty recognizing that other methods of teaching are even teaching at all. Moreover, a lot of my students have had very little contact with people from outside their home country, and as a result have very little understanding of other cultures. This comes out in some interesting ways at times, but it also makes me think that if this kind of RPG format works, it could be adapted quite well to a kind of cultural class. Something similar to like the old Carmen Sandiego TV series from the 1990s, or like Horrible Histories. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's have a look at my goals for these sessions. My primary goal is to build confidence, especially in the students who are quieter and very shy about speaking up in front of their classmates. I also want to give them opportunities to practice problem-solving skills and exercise their creativity. Hopefully, I will have an opportunity to introduce some cultural learning as well. And lastly, let's try to ensure that they have fun. Alright, I've got some goals and I've got some very good reasons to introduce this game to my students. Now, what else should we be thinking about, and what else should I bear in mind as I'm introducing this to them? First, and possibly most importantly, keep it simple. This is why I'm using D&D 5th edition as a base, as opposed to other systems that I'm a bit more familiar with and have a lot more experience as a dungeon master for. That being said, even flat using D&D 5th edition from the rulebook is probably going to be a bit too complicated, so I will need to trim things down even more. Second, be aware of cultural differences. Your students obviously do not have the same background as you, and many will have difficulty recognizing some cultural references. Moreover, students from other cultures are probably going to react quite poorly to certain themes or certain aspects of an adventure or story, or sometimes even certain monsters. For this reason, when I introduce D&D, or at least my version of D&D, to my students, I'm obviously going to replace the class cleric with simply healer. Third, go slow and help ease your players into role-playing. Part of the reason why the first few videos on my channel here were crafting videos was so that I could make as many monsters and other props that I needed to help my students visualize a D&D adventure. Theatre of the mind is not something that you want to jump into at the deep end, especially when you are doing this in a language that you do not have the full mastery of and are quite well aware that you do not fully understand. Last but not least, an RPG in a classroom is not the same as an RPG with your friends. Some of this should be fairly obvious at first glance, such as timing and scheduling. Like most people's RPG sessions will be held once a week or twice a week and will typically go for something like 4 hours. I don't have that kind of time available for my students. Even the 30 minutes at the end of each weekly lesson is probably asking a bit much, and most teachers would balk at that. Brian David Phillips, an ESL teacher in Taiwan, has written about his experience teaching and using role-playing games in his classrooms, and even he points out that he would often only have time for about 2 or 3 sessions over an entire semester. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you found this useful, and I hope someone got something out of this. If you have any experience using DnD or other role-playing games in your classroom, I would love to hear from you. Please feel free to leave a comment down below. Give a thumbs up if you like it. And next time, I'm going to tell you how my students reacted to this new game for them. But thank you very much, and goodbye.